Today, we will be hearing from some of the most successful and accomplished leaders in the healthcare industry. Our first speaker studied arts and science at McMaster University before pursuing medicine at the University of Toronto. Today, he leads research in cardiovascular surgery as a surgical director of heart transplantation at the University Health Network. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Mitesh Badiwala.
Sorry. Mine is just one of the many, many possible journeys that each and every one of you can take within the healthcare professions. So my journey started way back when I was essentially sitting in your type of seat. There was no HOSA back then, but if there was, I probably would be sitting in your seat. So, you know, when I was a kid, I thought, well, what am I going to do when I grow up? And as I grew, I kind of realized that I like to fix things, I like to help people, and I like to intellectually challenge myself. I graduated in Mississauga at the Woodland School in 1997. I grew up here, was born here. My parents were immigrants to this country. And when I was in high school, as each year went by, I became more and more active in community activities. I was on the Crime Stoppers group, I was in chemistry club, I was a prefect. So, you know, leadership started in high school. Then I decided, well, what am I going to do in university? And I really honestly didn't know that I completely wanted to be a doctor. But I knew I wanted to keep my options open. I wanted to advance myself in university. And so I chose to go to arts and science at McMaster. But prior to that, immediately prior to going to university, there was one event or one opportunity that I participated in that really shaped my trajectory, and that was volunteering. I volunteered at the emergency department at the Mississauga Hospital, which was down the street from where I lived, and that was my first glimpse into healthcare, frontline healthcare. And I used to go to the emergency department and change the sheets on the bed. That's where I started. I was changing sheets on the bed, watching the doctors take care of patients, watching the nurses take care of patients, watching all the different players in the healthcare team take care of patients on the front line. And that really shaped me because I thought, that's the environment I want to be in. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do, but I really want to work in a hospital type of environment. And so eventually I went to McMaster. Luckily, I got into the arts and science program. The arts and science program offered me the opportunity to learn about a wide array of things in life, essentially. Philosophy, science, math, etc. And it set me up to basically apply to whatever kind of healthcare-related specialty that I wanted to. At one point, I thought about applying to pharmacy school. But eventually, as I went through arts and science, I participated in a number of leadership activities, chairing a student dining committee, sitting on the Senate Committee for Student Affairs. I was on the peer conduct board. So leadership was kind of in the background. And I think that's important for all of you as you go through your educational pathways, that you should participate in not just participating for the sake of participating, but trying to achieve some sort of leadership position. I also participated in my own community. And back then, I used to take blood pressures at an annual health conference, essentially, where community members could come in for healthcare screenings. And so I tried to participate within my own community. Luckily, after 3 years in the arts and science program, I was accepted into the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine for medical school. And then the same question came up, now what? When I entered medical school, I had no idea what type of doctor I wanted to be. All I knew was that I wanted to enter the healthcare profession and work as a physician in some capacity. And a lot of medical students actually don't give a lot of thought into what branch of medicine that they want to go into, and that's completely fine. Medicine will present you with all sorts of different opportunities, but what's important is that you explore them early. Within 2 months of entering medical school, during my anatomy lectures and anatomy dissections, I became very, very interested in the heart. The heart to me was like an engine of a car. When I grew up, I enjoyed fixing helping my father fix the engines of our cars. And, I like to tinker in things. And the heart was a dynamic organ. It was moving, it had valves, it had coronary arteries, it had different parts. And so I wanted to explore the part of medicine that dealt with dealing with the heart. And so I sought out a mentor. My first mentor in medical school was Dr. Heather Ross. She's the immediate past president of the Canadian Cardiovascular Society. And at the time, she had just joined the staff at Toronto General Hospital to lead and reinvigorate the heart transplant program. And I used to follow her on Saturday mornings, just go in as she rounded in the ICU and took care of her patients. And she taught me about cardiovascular medicine. She taught me that heart disease is the #1 cause of death globally, that heart disease is the leading cause of death in Canada. It's the most costly disease in Canada, putting the greatest burden on our national healthcare system, and that heart failure, which was her subspecialty area, was the most rapidly rising heart disease amongst Canadians. And so within medicine, heart failure and heart disease to me, had a bright future in terms of being able to participate in that area of care. The second mentor I sought out was my first summer in medical school. I said to myself, well, I like to do research because I'd done a little bit of research at McMaster. I'd like to spend my summer doing research, but I'd like to spend it in an area that I may want to pursue as a career. And Dr. Richard Weisel is a cardiac surgeon scientist. He no longer operates. He runs a full-time laboratory. And he's currently the editor-in-chief of the premier journal in our specialty, the Journal of the Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery. He took me into his lab. And the first question he asked me was, Mitesh, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to work in your lab. He said, no, what do you want to do in your life? He wanted me to have a vision for what I wanted to do. And he said, well, it's good that you've come to me because you're interested in becoming a heart surgeon. If you wanted to be an ophthalmologist, you should have realized that the first day you stepped into medical school, because ophthalmology at the time was very, very competitive. So he took me into his lab, and while I was in the lab, I used to spend a day or two watching the surgeons operate. And that's where I really got hooked in heart surgery. But I also was able to do a number of research studies with him and his group and publish. And that led me down the track of academic surgery. My third mentor, who's now my chief and my surgical partner, was Dr. Vivek Rao. He had just come on staff, brand new, finished his fellowship, was going to lead the heart transplant program, and he took me under his wing, and I used to watch him operate, him and his partners, and the sight of heart surgery at the time, being a keen first-year medical student, was just amazing. And so I kept going back. I kept watching different surgeons operate, and I developed a keen interest, and that's me on the left, assisting one of my partners, Dr. Yao. And so even as a first and second year medical student, because I was so interested, the surgeons knew that. They could feel it from me. They could feel the enthusiasm. They let me scrub in with them and watch them operate. And so I got to learn about heart surgery firsthand as a first and second, then third and fourth year medical student. So by the time it came to apply to residency, I knew almost every single heart surgeon in the city because I'd gone around to work with all of them. And what was also obvious to me at the time, and what I learned and what I continue to value today, is that being a heart surgeon doesn't mean that I work in isolation. A heart surgery involves multiple team players. And here you see Cyril Sarek. He's the chief of our perfusion group. A perfusionist is what allows me as a heart surgeon to operate. We have to stop the heart, but it's the perfusionist who runs the machine to circulate the blood through a patient. And without a perfusionist, no heart surgeon would be able to do their job. And so it's important for us all to realize, and I realized this firsthand, that being a healthcare professional doesn't mean that you have to be the surgeon or that you have to be the cardiologist. It can mean that you can do valuable things that are very meaningful on a day-to-day basis and contribute to healthcare. And perfusion is another avenue for many of you to explore. This was me as a first-year resident. I'm on the right-hand side peeking in. So I started residency after medical school in 2004. And then the question was, well, what next? What branch of heart surgery do I want to do? And so my career path is summarized from the end of medical school to where I am essentially now in this one slide. I did 2 years of rotating residency rotations in a variety of specialty areas. Then I decided I wanted to go down the path of being a surgeon scientist or a surgeon investigator. And so that took me 4 years. I stepped out of my surgical training, did a PhD at U of T in one of the heart transplant labs. Then I left the lab and I went on to 3 years of senior surgical training where I learned how to actually operate as a cardiac surgeon. I wrote my exams at the Royal College and I became a fellow of the college in 2013. And then my mentor said, well, if you want a job, if you want a position with us, you have to go away. You have to go and learn something new and bring something new to the table. And so I left Toronto. I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, and I spent a year there as the Chief Advanced Cardiac Surgery Fellow, where I learned how to do complex valve repair. I brushed up on heart transplantation, which I'd learned in Toronto, but I did a lot more of it there, and you can see me going out and getting a heart. You know, I spent a lot of nights on small jets flying around the U.S. getting hearts for the heart transplants. And I also learned how to put in heart pumps or mechanical assistance. Then my senior-most mentor, Tyrone David, who is a world-renowned cardiac surgeon who I'm lucky to have as my senior partner now, came to Chicago, came to my graduation at my fellowship and said, Mitesh, you have to come home. He knew that they had offered me a job in Chicago as a faculty member there, and he came all the way to Chicago to bring me back. And luckily, I took his advice and I came home. And so I was recruited in 2014. I'm an attending cardiac surgeon at TGH, at Toronto General Hospital, professor at the university, and very quickly they knew that my research interests were aligned with heart transplantation, and so they appointed me the surgical director. And so I have the privilege and luxury of operating, and you see me there with one of my other partners, Maral Uzunian. And for all the women in the audience, yes, there are many women cardiac surgeons. It's not a male-led specialty. Maral is a fantastic aortic surgeon. She went away to Texas the year before me and learned about complex aortic surgery. So I do valve surgery, and when I have an aortic patient, she operates with me, and here I am helping her with a mitral valve. So now what's next? There's always a what's next in life. It doesn't end. So what's next for us is that we need to figure out how to do more heart transplants. We don't do enough heart transplants. We can only address 5 to 10% of the patients who would benefit from a heart transplant because there's just not enough donors out there. And so we're trying to come up with strategies to increase the donor pool. What we're doing is developing a perfusion system where we're able to make the heart work outside the body. We're going to be able to take hearts that we currently can't use for transplants and make them better outside of the body. And in that way, effectively advance the donor pool. We've assembled a team of engineers, of surgical residents and fellows, and our anesthesia fellows and echocardiographic teams are working with us to develop this system, which we are currently testing, where we're able to functionally assess hearts outside of the body. It's science fiction made reality, essentially. If you come to my lab, you'll see a heart beating outside of the body. And why do we do this? This is a picture of our heart transplant recipients. We have an annual gathering, and those of us who take care of them, cardiologists, surgeons, nurses, coordinators, we're amongst them. These patients are really the reason why we strive every day to advance heart transplantation, in my case, because we can see the life-changing impact that we make. We take patients who are essentially feeling like they're going to drown and die and turn their lives around where they can go home, live productive lives, go back to their children, and take care of their families. In summary, the keys to what I think were my success, as you can see by some of the things I tried to stress, were mentorship, mentorship, and more mentorship. And I continue to be mentored by my senior partners. And so you do have to develop those key relationships with individuals who are doing the things that you potentially want to do in the future. Understand what you're getting into. I knew I was getting into something that would take me a long, long time to finish. So you have to understand what you're getting into and not fool yourself into thinking that there's going to be an easy path. It's hard work. It's long hours. Healthcare in general, across the specialties, is not a 9-to-5 job. You have to be willing to put those hours in to reap the benefits personally, financially, and otherwise. Be passionate about what you want and go for it. And that's what I did. Thank you. Stay on stage, we're going to give you a plaque.
Thank you, Dr. Badiwala. Before you leave, please accept this award as a token for our appreciation for the experience and insight you've shared with us today.
Thank you.
That's fine.